The sun above Colony Station 9 was hotter than usual. It hung low and red, casting long shadows across the metal streets and towers that stretched toward the sky like cold fingers. People gathered slowly, forming a quiet crowd in the square. There were no signs, no chants, no anger in their eyes, just silence, like everyone had already accepted what was about to happen. At the center of the square stood a platform made of black stone. Soldiers guarded it from all sides, their faces, hidden behind silver helmets, standing as still as statues. The air was dry. Dust blew gently through the streets, brushing against boots, robes, and long coats. Everyone had come for one reason. They were going to witness the punishment of an alien. Her name was Velai. She walked slowly under the weight of heavy chains, her wrists pulled forward, and her steps shaky on the platform floor. Her skin was a soft gray blue with silver markings along her temples, common to her kind, the Lurethi. Her eyes, large and pale, scanned the crowd not with anger, but with quiet sadness, like she had already made peace with whatever was going to happen next. The soldiers flanked her but didn't say a word. Velai kept her head high, but her lips trembled slightly. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like someone who hadn't spoken in days. The people watching her were mostly human, workers, miners, a few officers off duty, and even some children sitting on their parents' shoulders, not quite understanding what they were seeing. A few other aliens stood at the edges, watching quietly, careful not to draw attention to themselves. The rules here were strict, and after years of conflict between Earth and other species, most knew better than to question decisions made by the station's command. A loud voice echoed from the overhead speakers, cold and official. Velai of the Lurethi Dominion, you are hereby sentenced under Federation Code 17A, accused of unauthorized communication with hostile forces and conspiracy against the stability of Station 9. The words hit the crowd like a wave, but no one moved. No one cheered, no one cried. They just watched. Velai closed her eyes for a moment. In the crowd, a man named Elias stood near the back. He wasn't tall or strong-looking, just a quiet human with a worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder. His hair was messy from the wind, and his clothes marked him as a field medic. He had seen things in his time, wounds, grief, fear, but something about this moment made his heart feel heavier than usual. He didn't come to the square looking for trouble. He came because someone told him an alien was going to be executed, and a part of him hoped it wasn't true. But now he was here, and he couldn't look away. When he saw Velai's face, something shifted in him. It was strange. He didn't recognize her. Yet she reminded him of someone he had treated years ago during the war. A young girl. Lurethi, just like Velai. She had lost her parents in a building collapse and sat for hours in silence until Elias gave her water and wrapped her hands in clean cloth. He had watched that little girl fade away days later, despite his best efforts. It haunted him still. And now, standing in this dusty square, he felt the same quiet pain all over again. The announcer's voice continued. Evidence gathered suggests direct communication with rebel Lurethi fleets. You were caught with a transponder in your possession. Your actions have risked the lives of both humans and civilians alike. Final sentence will be carried out at sunset. No appeals granted. There was a short silence. Velai's eyes opened, and she looked up at the crowd, then at the sky. The same sky above her home planet, now far away and unreachable. Somewhere in the group, a child asked their mother, "Is she bad?" The mother didn't answer. Elias stayed still. His thoughts raced. The Lurethi didn't all support the war. In fact, many had risked their lives to help humans during it. He knew that firsthand. So why was this woman being blamed? Was there even a real trial? The voice on the speaker said nothing more. The guards stepped back, waiting for the signal. The execution would not be violent. They used clean methods now. But it didn't matter how quiet or sterile it was. It was still a life being taken in front of a crowd. Valai stood quietly, her lips moving just barely, whispering something in her language. No one could hear her clearly, but Elias could read her expression. She wasn't asking for mercy. She was trying to tell the truth, and no one wanted to listen. As the shadows lengthened and the sun lowered behind the towers, Elias felt his fingers tighten around the strap of his satchel. His mouth felt dry. Something inside him pushed against the silence. He didn't plan to speak. He didn't plan to move. But now, he wasn't so sure he could stay still. Not when a quiet voice was about to be silenced forever. The sun was beginning to fall behind the towers when he saw her lips move again. Elias stood in the same place, surrounded by a crowd that had started to grow more restless. Some people whispered to each other. A few checked the time on their wrist screens. The guards didn't move. Valai didn't move. Everything felt frozen, except for Elias's heart. It beat harder with every second. He didn't know what was happening to him. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, like she knew she didn't belong here, like she had already accepted her fate but didn't stop hoping, not fully. He had seen that look before, not in war, not on the battlefield, but in the eyes of a child, one cold night, in a ruined shelter made of broken metal and loose wires. Years ago, back during the Lorethi-human conflict, Elias had served as a field medic. He never carried a weapon, only bandages, medicine, and tools for stitching wounds. He went where others didn't, places full of pain, full of smoke, and quiet cries. That night, he had followed a distress signal and found a small group of injured civilians, all Lorethi. Soldiers had left them behind. He wasn't supposed to help them. Orders were strict back then, but he did. He couldn't just watch people suffer, not when he had the skills to save them. There was a young girl, no older than 6, who had a deep wound on her arm and blood in her hair. She didn't cry. She just stared at the wall, as if she wasn't really there anymore. Elias had carried her out with his own arms. He wrapped her in a blanket and gave her water. He stayed with her until sunrise. She didn't make it, but she held his hand the whole night, and she never stopped watching him. Valai's eyes reminded him of hers. He didn't know Valai, didn't know her history, her choices, or why the Federation believed she had done something wrong. But he could tell one thing with complete certainty. She wasn't a monster. She was afraid, but proud, alone, but not broken. A soft voice near Elias spoke. "She doesn't look guilty." He turned. A middle-aged man with a thick coat and tired eyes stood beside him. Elias said nothing. "I've seen guilty faces before," the man continued. "They don't look like hers." Elias gave a small nod, then looked back at the platform. Valai stood under the last rays of light. Her chains shimmered like dull silver ropes. The guards were beginning to prepare something, inputting codes into a small control panel built into the platform. The final moment was near. Elias's hands felt cold. He knew what he had to do, but fear pulled at his thoughts. What if he was wrong? What if speaking up made things worse? What if no one listened? But he also knew that doing nothing would stay with him forever. He'd already lost someone once by being too late. He wouldn't let it happen again. His foot moved. Then the next. Before he realized it, he was walking one step, then another. The crowd parted slowly as he moved toward the front. Some people gave him confused looks. Others whispered. He felt their eyes, felt the heat rising in his chest. But he kept walking. As he reached the steps of the platform, one of the guards raised a hand. "Please step back, citizen," the guard said in a flat tone. "I have something to say," Elias answered, louder than he expected. The other guards looked over. One stepped closer, placing a hand on his weapon, not drawing it, just as a warning. "You're interrupting a classified military sentence," said another. "She's innocent," Elias said. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. "This is wrong." Murmurs rose in the crowd. Some leaned in, others pulled back. The officer in charge of the platform turned toward him, a tall woman in Federation gray with sharp features and eyes like glass. "Who are you?" she asked. "Elias Grant, civilian medic. Former Lieutenant Medical Corps," he said quickly. She scanned him. "You're retired. You have no clearance." "I have knowledge," he said. "And evidence." She raised an eyebrow. "You're claiming what, exactly?" "I treated Lurithi refugees during the conflict. I know how many of them helped us. I know this woman's kind. And I believe she was working with us, not against us. The charges don't make sense." "You're accusing us of lying?" "I'm saying a mistake was made." The officer folded her arms. "There was a transponder found in her possession. She was intercepted during a classified message transfer." Elias took a breath. "Then ask why a rebel spy would use an old, trackable device. Why she wouldn't run. Why she didn't resist. Maybe she was passing information to us, not the other side." The officer's face remained still. "She deserves a trial," Elias said. "A real one, with witnesses, evidence, not this." Silence returned to the square. Even Velai seemed surprised. One of the guards turned to the officer, quietly speaking, into her earpiece. She didn't respond at first. The crowd stood still. One child clapped once, then stopped, unsure. Finally, the officer stepped forward. "You're overstepping, Mr. Grant, but protocol requires a delay if a valid concern is raised under Emergency Article 14. She turned to her team. "Pause proceedings." The guard stepped away from the control panel. Elias exhaled slowly. His knees felt weak. He wasn't arrested yet, but he knew this wasn't over. Speaking up had only bought time. Velai looked at him for the first time. Her lips moved again. This time he could read them. "Thank you." He gave a tiny nod. The sun disappeared behind the towers. The sky turned soft and gold. For a moment it was quiet again, but not in the same way. Now, something had shifted, not just in the crowd, in the story that was just beginning. The square slowly emptied as the sun slipped away, leaving only the soft glow of station lights. People returned to their homes and jobs, but their hearts carried something new: uncertainty. A silence had been broken, and no one quite knew what would happen next. Elias sat quietly on a bench near the side of the square. His hands were locked together, elbows on his knees, head down. He wasn't sure if he had done the right thing. He hadn't planned any of it. The words had just come out of him, fast, loud, and impossible to take back. He glanced around. Guards were still nearby, watching him. Not with anger, but with cold attention. He wasn't arrested. Not yet. But he was definitely on their list. Now. Velai had been taken away from the platform. Not released, but moved back to a holding area in the inner part of the station. The officers said they would review things. That didn't promise anything. That didn't mean justice would be done. But at least, for now, she was alive. Elias sighed and looked up at the sky again. The stars above the colony always felt strange to him, distant, scattered, like they were watching and waiting. Maybe that was why he stayed here. Earth had grown too loud, too sure of itself. Out here on the edge of space, things were still, unclear. Just like Velai's story, he needed more. If he wanted to help her, really help her, he had to prove she was telling the truth. He pulled a small screen from his satchel and tapped it on. The device flickered, then glowed blue. He opened his old secure logs, the ones from when he used to be a medic with field access. A lot of them were locked now, restricted after his discharge, but some remained. He found it, an old entry from 6 months ago. A Lurethi translator he had worked with briefly. Her name was Sale. She had been part of a peaceful outreach team before the fighting got worse. She had mentioned something about a coded warning sent to the Federation just days before a surprise attack. Elias stared at the message. It was vague, not enough to be proof. But it might be a thread. Maybe Valai was that messenger. Maybe she had been trying to help. He stood up, heart steady now. The time for fear was over. He needed to get to someone who still had access to military archives. Someone who still believed in truth. But first, he had to see Valai again. Back inside the station, the holding area was quiet and guarded. Elias approached slowly. The officer at the door raised a hand. "Access denied," he said simply. "I'm requesting medical inspection." "She hasn't been evaluated," Elias replied. The officer blinked, confused. "That's not procedure." "Neither is public execution without appeal," Elias said, keeping his voice calm. There was a pause. "Wait here," the officer muttered, turning to speak into his communicator. Minutes passed. Then finally, the door opened with a low hiss. Valai sat inside the holding cell, small and simple, with only a narrow bench and a dim light above. She looked up as Elias entered. Her eyes were wide but calm. He stepped in and stood silently. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Valai said softly, "Why did you stop them?" Her voice had an accent, gentle and musical. Elias replied, "Because I don't believe you're what they say you are." She tilted her head slightly. "Many don't care what I am." "I do." He took a step closer. "Were you sending a message to the rebels?" Valai shook her head. "No, I was warning your people. A rebel fleet planned, an attack on a supply route. I used the only device I could find. It was old, easy to track, but I didn't have time. Why didn't you run?" "Because if I ran, they would never believe me. I thought if I stayed, someone would listen." Elias looked at her. "I'm listening now, and I'm going to find proof." Valai's eyes softened. "You're risking much," she said. "I've already lost people who didn't deserve to die," he answered. "I don't want to add you to that list." He left her with a nod, heart pounding again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from purpose. Back in his room that night, Elias reached out to an old contact, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Commander Rhea Nolan, a former intelligence officer who had retired to a quiet post on another colony moon. They had once worked together on refugee logistics. She had a sharp mind and even sharper memory. He sent a secure message. "Need eyes on Station 9 archives. Possible wrongful sentence. Lurethi woman. Name, Valai. May connect to rebel fleet leak 6 months ago. Any record on her in black files?" He didn't expect a fast answer, but only an hour later a reply came. "Searching. Your name raises questions. Be careful, I'll do what I can." The next day, Elias was called into a hearing room inside the station. 4 officers waited. Their faces were unreadable. One of them stood. "Mr. Grant, you spoke out during a classified event. Your behavior disrupted official procedures. Do you deny this?" "No," Elias said clearly. "You're aware this could cost you your residency on this station?" "I am," the officer frowned. "And still, you make claims with no evidence." "I'm working on that," Elias replied. "And if I'm right, it means we almost punished someone who was helping us." The room went quiet. Finally, the lead officer spoke again. "You have 48 hours to provide any support to your claim. Until then, Valai remains in custody." Elias nodded. He walked out, unsure if he had made progress or only bought more time. But it didn't matter. He was in now, and he wasn't backing down, not until the truth was heard. The next morning began with a quiet knock on Elias's door. He opened it slowly, not sure who to expect. Outside stood a young delivery technician holding a small, sealed package. "For Elias Grant," the boy said, handing it over with a cautious, "Look." Elias thanked him and shut the door quickly, locking it behind him. The package had no name, no return code, only a tiny silver mark on one corner. Elias recognized that mark. It was Commander Rhea Nolan's way of saying, "This is real and this is dangerous." He sat at his small desk, heart racing as he opened the seal. Inside was a thin data chip and a folded note written by hand. He read it slowly, line by line. "There is a file buried in the Defense Archives. Not public. Not even on most logs. 6 months ago, a Lurathi named Velai transmitted a warning about a rebel attack on Sector 4D, an ambush that could have cost thousands of lives. The file was flagged and then hidden. Someone didn't want that warning to be known. Someone wanted her silenced. This is a copy of the original report. Use it wisely. Stay safe." Elias stared at the chip in his hand. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he slowly inserted it into his portable reader. There it was. A brief, encrypted transmission. Voice only. The translation matched the Lurathi dialect, Velai's voice. "This is Velai, independent translator, assigned to Human Lurathi Aid Station near the Silver Border. I have urgent information. A rebel fleet is planning an ambush on Federation Convoy Route 4D. They will strike in less than 5 cycles. Please respond if you receive this. I am risking much." Elias leaned back, stunned. She had told the truth, from the very beginning. He ran his hands through his hair. Whoever buried this report had done it with intention. Maybe to protect their own mistake. Maybe to hide the fact that someone failed to act on her warning. And instead of rewarding her, they labeled her a spy and almost ended her life for it. He had to get this to the tribunal. He copied the file to a secure device and placed the original back in the package. He burned the note, too risky to keep. Then he grabbed his satchel and left his room, walking straight toward the main command building. This time, when the guard stopped him, he didn't hesitate. "I have new evidence for the review board," he said firmly. "It proves Velai was not working against the Federation. She was warning us." The guards led him inside. The tribunal had already gathered in a small hearing room. 3 officers, 1 civilian legal advisor, and 2 quiet observers from Earth's central authority. Velai was not present. She remained in holding, waiting for their decision. Elias stood in front of them and took a deep breath. "I have a copy of a voice transmission," he began, holding out the device. "It's from Velai, dated 6 months ago. The message warned of a rebel attack on Sector 4D. That same area suffered heavy damage 2 days after her transmission was ignored. This message was flagged, then hidden." The lead officer raised an eyebrow. "And how did you obtain this file?" "I received it through a secure channel from a trusted retired commander, Rhea Nolan. You'll find her name in the old refugee logs. She remembers Velai, and she confirmed the file's existence." They plugged in the device. The room fell silent as Velai's voice played. When it ended, no one spoke right away. Then the civilian advisor turned to the tribunal. "This changes everything." "It may have been a miscommunication," one officer offered. "We don't know why the message was hidden." "We don't," Elias agreed. "But we do know one thing now. Velai is not a traitor. She risked her life to protect humans, and we almost destroyed her for it." There was a long pause. Then the lead officer stood. "We will reconvene in 2 hours. This must be reviewed." Elias left the room with a weight on his shoulders, but he walked faster now. Back in the holding area, the guard who had once refused him now opened the door without a word. Velai looked up from her bench. She was tired, pale, but calm. Elias gave a small smile. "I found it," he said. "Your message. I played it for them." Velai said nothing at first. Her lips parted slightly, as if the idea was hard to believe. Then she spoke softly. "Thank you." Elias sat across from her. "They'll decide soon, but I think you'll be free." Valai looked down at her hands. "They were going to end my story without knowing who I am." "They still might try to ignore it," Elias said, "but not with me standing in their way." She looked up. "Why did you care so much? We're not even from the same world." He thought for a moment. "Because no one else was speaking, and I couldn't forget what I saw in your eyes." For a while they sat in silence. Valai finally whispered, "There is still kindness in humans." Elias smiled gently. "And there is still courage in yours." Later that afternoon, a notice went out across the station. Valai was cleared of all charges. Her record would be corrected. Her life spared. Some celebrated, some were confused. Few turned away, unwilling to accept the truth. But the truth had spoken, and it could no longer be hidden. Elias was summoned one last time to meet with the tribunal. "This was not the proper procedure," the lead officer said carefully. "But what you did revealed a serious error. For that, we recognize your actions. You're also being removed from station residency," another officer added, "for breaking protocol." Elias nodded. "I expected that." "You have until sunrise to leave. Transport will be arranged." He left the room with no anger in his heart, because he had done what was right. Outside the station, Valai waited, beside the transport dock. A small bag rested at her feet. "You're leaving?" she asked. "They're making me," Elias said. Valai stepped closer. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet, but I'll find somewhere." She held out a small ID chip. "Come with me. My people owe you more than thanks." Elias looked at it. For the first time in weeks, he smiled fully. He took the chip, and together, as dawn lit the horizon, they boarded a shuttle. Not as prisoner and witness, but as two souls who had seen what truth looked like, even in a world that tried to hide it. The shuttle lifted off smoothly, the sound of the engines humming softly around Elias and Valai. Outside the window, Colony Station 9 grew smaller and smaller, a cluster of lights and metal disappearing into the darkness of space. For the first time in a long while, the world felt quieter, less heavy. Valai sat across from Elias, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly in the soft light of the cabin. She looked calm but tired. Elias noticed how her eyes scanned the stars, as if they were searching for a place to call home. He wondered what she must have felt in those long hours waiting in the holding cell, the fear, the hope, the loneliness. And yet, here she was, still standing, still alive. "Where are we going?" Elias asked softly. "To my home planet," Valai replied. "It is far from here, peaceful, a place where we can rest." He nodded. The idea of a peaceful place sounded like a dream after all he had been through. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for everything you did, for standing up when no one else would." Elias smiled, but inside he felt a deep warmth. "I didn't do enough, but I'm glad you're safe." She looked at him then, her eyes clear and steady. "You risked a lot for me. You saved my life. Not many humans would do that." He shrugged. "Maybe some do. Maybe more than you think." The shuttle moved smoothly through space, and time seemed to slow. Elias thought about everything that had happened. The fear he felt when she was sentenced, the courage it took to speak out, the evidence that finally proved her innocence. He realized that sometimes it wasn't just about rules or orders. It was about the choices people made when faced with hard truths. Valai broke the silence. "Do you miss your home?" Elias nodded. "Yes, but I never really felt at home anymore." Not after the war. She smiled softly. Home is not just a place. It is where you feel safe, where you are accepted. He looked at her and felt something shift inside. Maybe this new place, this new journey, could be home. As the shuttle neared Velai's planet, Elias watched the stars change, bright blue suns, gentle green moons, and a soft purple haze around the horizon. The planet was beautiful, peaceful, as she had promised. When the shuttle landed, Velai led Elias through a quiet city filled with tall trees and shining buildings that reflected the light like crystals. The air smelled fresh and sweet. Children laughed and played nearby, and aliens of many kinds moved calmly, smiling as they passed. Elias felt a calmness he hadn't known in years. Velai brought him to a small house surrounded by flowering plants. It was simple but warm, with soft cushions and glowing lanterns hanging from the ceiling. "This is where you can stay," she said. "As long as you want." He looked around, amazed. "Thank you." Days passed. Elias helped Velai and her community in small ways, repairing tools, teaching human languages, and sharing stories from Earth. In return, they shared their history, their music, and their kindness. It was a new life. One day, as Elias sat outside, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors he had never seen before, Velai joined him. "Why did you risk everything for me?" she asked again, gently. He thought for a moment. "Because I believe people can be better than their fears. Because I wanted to prove that kindness can still win." She smiled, her eyes shining with hope. "Maybe humans and Lurethi are not so different after all." "No," Elias agreed. "Maybe we're not." The sun dipped below the horizon and the sky filled with stars. Two very different beings sat together in silence, bound by respect, courage, and a new friendship. In that moment, it didn't matter where they came from. What mattered was what they had become. Elias knew the journey was only beginning. Together, they would face whatever came next, with hope, with trust, and with the promise that no one's story should ever end in silence. Because in the vastness of space, every life mattered.